Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to today's first performance here at the Whale Pool stage. Today we are starting off with Bye Bye Biometrics, AI Demands Stronger Security Standards by ETH.
Sam Cassett.
Okay, great. My name is Miko. I'm a managing partner with Gumi Cryptos Capital, so I'm one of those evil VCs that you hear about. So I'm super excited because these are some of the mega OG heavy hitters and intellectual super giants of this segment. So I'm really excited to have this panel. Let's actually go through self-introduction. So we'll just do the round robin 2-minute self-introduction, starting with Evin.
GM, everyone, thank you so much for taking time out of your feels like fairly early mornings here at ETHDenver. My name is Evin McMullen, co-founder of Privado ID, and this morning, or actually yesterday morning, we just started to roll out the Billions Network. Billions.network is the first human and AI network built with mobile-first verification, so you can prove who you are from the safety of your phone. We leverage zero-knowledge attestations to make it easy for you to prove that you are a person, a unique person, that you live in a certain place, you are a certain age, have certain traits and preferences, so that you can take your identity with you and use it to leverage benefits and personalized rewards both on and off-chain.
That's awesome. Okay, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Billy. I've been around for a long time. I am the founder and CEO of Intuition, and our goal is to give all things better intuition in all of their interactions by giving them the information they need when they need it from the sources they trust. So we're kind of this semantic data discoverability protocol, and a one-liner we've been testing out is Google for AI, so you guys can let me know how well that resonates after this.
Okay, let's keep going.
Hey everyone, my name is Francis Burwaff from ZK Pass. We are a privacy-centric protocol built on zero-knowledge proofs. So just imagine that you're able to share information about yourself, such as your age or your credit score, without disclosing all of the details. So that's essentially what we focus on.
Wonderful. Okay, so what I'd like to do is start with kind of the main topic today, which is bye-bye biometrics, right? So biometric ID, fingerprint, face, who the heck are you, right? So to me, you can't talk about this topic without invoking everybody's favorite friend, which is Sybil, right? So I guess the thing that I'm curious about is to get reactions from the gang, because everyone knows that one way to get rid of Sybil is to go to WorldCoin and stare into a giant eyeball, created by the Dark Lord Sauron. But why don't you guys take a crack at what do we do about Sybil? So Evin, why don't you start?
So much to do about Sybil, Miko. I definitely
much ado.
I definitely think that there are more scalable approaches than creating databases full of body parts from the Lord Sauron. But perhaps if we take a step back and talk about just sort of basic scalability and where we find these challenges, obviously many of you have probably been on chain before and may have encountered an instance where you are interacting with a non-human counterparty. Certainly, if you've been on crypto Twitter recently, the reply guys are out there in force. Now, about 50% of internet traffic today comes from unaccountable bots. That means, agents, as you might refer to them depending on the instance, but basically non-human actors that do not have an accountability mechanism. No way to ask, who's your daddy? Take me to your leader. And so with that challenge comes the adverse instance of having multiple parties colluding. We have the premise of farming, but I don't necessarily think that's always a bad thing. I think it is a naturally occurring phenomena. But with that in mind, we have to think about how we scale the ability to identify unique parties. And as I mentioned earlier, I think proprietary hardware is too big of a bottleneck to be scalable globally. And so on our team, we focus on mobile devices as a point of entry and a point of identification.
Interesting. Billy, you sound like
Yes.
you look like you have a take.
Yeah, I've got a take. I think that we're entering this kind of interesting philosophical realm where it's going to be, what is a Sybil attack? Like, at what threshold of intelligence is a bot or an agent treated as kind of like a unique thing that is actually like maybe not bad? Like, sure, proof of human, like we might want to know if a thing is human or artificial intelligence, but then you enter the philosophical realm of, are the AI just us? And so, like, are those actually also human and just kind of like the aggregate human consciousness? So I don't think that proof of humanity or biometric scans is going to be enough, because, like, you're going to have hardware intelligences. And so what I think you need to kind of combat, Sybil attacks is just web of trust. Things saying things about things, you listening to the voices you trust, and kind of like figuring things out that way.
That is a helpful mindset. So intuition creates a web of trust. So that is a mechanism through which you can kind of start to understand who's up to what. Francis, ZK take?
We look at it from the perspective of deep fake, as well as basically being able AI-generated sort of counterfeit of a human being. So anywhere from your voice to your actual features and recognition can be compromised, and multiple accounts can be created in that format. So we look at it from a cryptographic perspective and stating that if you replace Sybil with math, essentially, then you are able to avoid that.
So just to kind of give a quick overview, when you really start to scrutinize, last I checked, this whole ZK Pass construct is loosely coupled to the ZKTLS construct, right, where you can actually have things like KYC-based identity, through these secure channels, right? So ZKTLS, HTTPS, SSL, traditional Web 2 authentication, and then identity based on that, right? Some of that stuff is pretty hard, right? So to me, I think the next topic is really why not biometrics, right? Because I believe that the thing that we're saying about the ZKTLS is that Sybil generally doesn't have a fingerprint, generally, right? Or maybe yet, right? And Sybil generally won't have a kind of a Face ID, maybe yet, right? But the thing that's interesting about ZKTLS is that Sybil may not have a government ID, maybe yet, right? So these are the kind of things we're reduced to, right? Where we're basically like trying to catch Sybil. And then I think Billy's point with intuition is that Sybil maybe doesn't have a lot of trusted friends yet. All of these are yet, right? So, Sybil will be super interesting when Sybil has fingers and thumbprints and Face ID and a government ID. So that'll be an interesting version of Sybil. Evin?
So I think we're actually getting there a little sooner than you might think. To address your question, Miko, why not leverage unique biometrics as the basis or the anchor of your public identifier? In short, you can't rotate your thumbs. You can't rotate your eyeballs. Tying all of your data where your private key is immutable and immutably tied to your human person makes for a pretty difficult key rotation strategy. Now, I'm sure there will be surgical approaches in the future.
Sybil can rotate her fingerprints.
But actually, what our team just released this week is what we call the deep trust framework, or the ability to assign a unique identifier to an instance of an agent and to relate that to a unique human being or a set of unique human beings. So this process, we call it KYA, know your agent. But this framework allows you to have deep trust in a specific agent instance so it can represent itself as acting on behalf of you and can enter spaces where you have privileges to do so. And so we can add a little bit of interesting nuance to the types of coordination games we can play with our agents when we can confer privileges upon them based on our own identity.
This gets pretty bad though, right? I mean, the scariness that we're talking about here is, when Sybil gets a hold of your fingerprint, right? That's a super complex situation, because what I'm saying here is this, right? Which is that one of the problems that we have inside of the blockchain space is the problem of physical embodiment, right? And obviously the wrench attack is probably the most famous incarnation of a security problem that arises out of the fact that we reside inside of bodies, right? But the thing that's really interesting is the traditional way of reasoning about security is that authentication can be based on things that like a password, right? Or things that you have, like or things like for example hardware keys, right? Or things that you are, or like a any kind of private key, right? If you have the private key, then But the problem with the private key, as we all know, is that Sybil can get your private key. So I guess to me, if you get rid of the biometrics, then which I understand why you're getting rid of biometrics, but then I'm just like, where do we go? Billy, I want to give you a shot.
I mean, I think every piece of data is useful. So I think biometric data is useful. I don't think you should rely on any kind of single point of failure where it's like, oh, I just need the WorldCoin eyeball scan and then we're good. We solve everything. Or I don't just need the fingerprint and then we solve it. It's like, no. Like the way that things are going to emerge is kind of, you need the aggregate set of data that like the thing has created and the aggregate set of data created about the thing. And then you can reason about the reputation of the thing. And I think that is kind of like the true answer to the Sybil problem, especially in this world where you don't just need proof of unique human, you need proof of like valuable contributor to thing. Like you might have a swarm of bots that aren't human, but they're performing a bunch of really productive actions. So you need to know the reputation of the thing, and the reputation is the aggregate of the data about it. And that's why something like intuition is so important, because it's like allows you to traverse all of the like verifiable data about the thing in aggregate.
I think let me throw it to you, but actually you have a quick response to. Okay, so my retort here it's not a retort actually, it's support, which is that part of what's happened in the entire crypto space is actually that there's 3 games that are being played, right? The 3 games are basically the zero-sum game, right, which is mostly traders, right? Like I win, you lose, right? Then the positive-sum game, which is I've built something and I'm open sourcing it, or I'm giving it to you, right? That's the positive-sum game, right? And then there's the negative-sum game, right, which is the negative sum game is basically like ransomware. Like recently there were these huge chat logs that were leaked from a ransomware club. And it turned out that one of the arguments inside of the club that they were kind of having was a group of them had started getting the ransomware money, and then not providing the decryption key, like basically. And there was kind of this weird ethical argument inside of their chat room where they were like, is that cool? Like, can I just rug these guys, keep their data and get the money, right? So that's negative sum, right? So I'm just describing these 3 realms. And I just want to say with respect to what Billy's talking about, he's really talking about how does the crypto community identify who the positive sum actors are so they can choose to collaborate with people who are non-malevolent, whether they're Sybil or not, right? So it's sort of like if you have a benevolent Sybil, then team up by all means. Francis?
Well, I was going to add actually to your point and to Billy's, even what we're talking about is not perfect, right? As he stated, you don't want to eliminate every single method that we have. Instead, you want to continue to augment and improve it. ZK snarks are not perfect because you need a trusted setup. And we all know that's also a point of vulnerability to a degree, right? If someone has your private, they can also manipulate that. I mean, it's not perfect. So we continue, even from our side, we just continue to search. And we used to, for just example, not getting into any technical terminology here, but we used to use volley-based ZK, right? And then we combined that with ZK snarks. But we saw that it wasn't perfect. There is also a case where we're not going to be perfect. So we just eliminated the snarks automatically and went into this volley in the head, which basically does not require trusted setups. And even everything that's verified is publicly out there. So it doesn't have any like private verifiers and so forth. I mean, in this kind of methodology, my point is that we just continue to improve, and that's all that we could do. Whether you combine biometric with zero-knowledge proofs in order to hide the keys but ensure that access is still granted to the appropriate individual, or you eliminate one or the other, you have to just make sure that the tech can speak. And that's why I mentioned earlier that mathematical process is probably better than physical human vulnerability, and with AI advancing these days.
I like this. I think the missing element with respect to key rotation of fingerprints is the thing that's interesting is that you have actually, if you count your thumbs as fingerprints, you actually have 10 of them, right? But the problem is actually key deletion, right? Because there isn't provable deletion, right? So that's a problem, right? Because if you register your index finger, right, even if you tell your local device that you delete the index finger and you go to the next finger, right, you're still kind of hosed if it's already been authorized in a cloud somewhere, right? So that's bad. But I still feel like I'm still very attached to my fingerprints for some reason, and I feel like you're gonna have to pry biometrics out of my cold, dead fingers. Maybe it's kind of gross, but.
I think also, maybe this is a little side tangent, but one really important thing to think about is, like a fingerprint is okay for maybe like authenticating into your phone and, maybe they can see your text messages or whatever. But if that controls your entire identity and all your money, like the collision rate isn't zero. So that's really not that good. And we looked into this at Uport like, I don't know, 8 years ago, and there was like all these companies trying to figure out like things with like almost zero collision rate. There are companies doing like heartbeat stuff and all these crazy things, and no one like solved that. So if it like you can't, I think an aggregate set of biometrics might get you there, or an aggregate set of multiple data points, but I don't think one biometric thing can really secure your whole life.
Oh, I like that.
And also, Miko, all I need is your coffee cup in order to get 10 versions of your fingerprint. I just need your coffee cup right now,
Yeah. That's true.
You don't have to be dead for me to get your fingerprint.
Yeah, but I actually really maintain very tight custody OPSEC around my coffee cup, so you got to watch out. To me, the thing that is really, I guess the question becomes like, where does this go in the future, right? Because obviously we're really talking about kind of like the present, right? Which is, we're really getting rid of biometrics, right? But in the present, but like, where does this go in the future? So
I have kind of like a three-phase view of how the evolution of data sharing and observability is going down. For a long time, kind of phase one, which I think we've moved out of, the government had a monopoly on surveillance, the sort of government panopticon, the ability to discover and compute upon or pursue information about various citizens. But that right was not also similarly made available to private enterprise. Now, with technology, we are living in the public-private panopticon, let's say, with a combination of surveillance from our devices, cameras on Teslas, public CCTV, private security, various different mesh networks that are kind of these overlapping sets of coverage of data that can be compelled by some parties, sometimes by individual users, but not always by those individuals. And then I think we are moving toward this future state that you might call the personal panopticon, where I think that there will be a much broader variety of methods of data collection and data aggregation about who you are, what you do, how you've impacted the space around you, as Billy was discussing, sort of filling out the data required to build a web of trust. And I think that will create an abundant set of data such that we will be able to deduce a shared truth.
So for those of you who are looking for some entertainment, go ahead and read the Wikipedia page for Panopticon. It's a very interesting form of prison that actually it's frequently cited in postmodern or post-structuralist academic literature. So Panopticon. There's your New York Times word of the day. Future?
Oh man. Like I'm just a really big believer in the web of trust, because that's how like everything works in the world. Everything is just social consensus all the way down. You have like intra-subjective consensus where you go around the world and you collect data points and you come to consensus about things being true. It's like, oh, if I jump and I come back down, it happens every time. So there's like a thing like gravity, and then we all observe it. And then if you observe something that everyone else isn't observing, then you're crazy. So like everything is social consensus. So I think like web of trust is kind of the way that the fabric of society and like I don't know, it's kind of the way the world works right now. So in order to get there in this kind of like self-sovereign identity, self-sovereign data, or like agent-centric data world where the entity is the fulcrum point around which you aggregate the data, you need the ability to kind of traverse all of that data, which gets hard if it's self-sovereign and it's private. So it's like, how do you traverse that whole data set? So you need like discoverability protocols to be able to do that and to request the data you need to authenticate a thing. Like I think it instead of it being like, oh, you know, the counterparty requesting a specific credential, like I need the US passport from the US government, or I need that plus an eyeball scan from WorldCoin. It's like, what data do you have? Like, what can you present to me? And the selective disclosure model of that is hard when you don't have like a discoverability protocol to understand like what data points you can request. So I think like that's the way that things are going to emerge, and I think it's just going to be very fluid, and it's just going to be things requesting different data points from different things to get them to authenticate or do things or to interact generally.
I definitely appreciate that. My quick retort is more just as I'm detecting a fundamentally post-structuralist overtone, right, which is in the absence of a dominant meta-narrative, we essentially are reduced to sort of like this idea of like collecting a pastiche, right? We're basically collecting whatever we can collect, and we're basically building these pastiches. So I think that makes sense. Francis?
So everything that we're talking about revolving around data and privacy, the only reason this is all important is because it has to do with our own private data. We all know that there's more important private data than there is public data out there. So if we look into where the world is heading with AI, of course, being at the forefront, then we have to assume that it's not just about my personal information, how do I protect it, what is the best. It's also going to be how I interact externally with AI's involvement. So what we looked at, and actually we've been researching this for some time, is let's look at it from a perspective of these agents and what they're going to help us do in our lives. Well, traditional LLMs right now, they're just out there getting answers and information that's public knowledge out there, right? But then you have hallucination, you have knowledge gaps. So instead, no one really is looking at private data agents, because in this case, they cannot get information that is, let's say, specialized medical data or your own personal bank information in order to provide accurate answers, nor are they able to, in this case, basically have the most up-to-date information. They have to be up to the level where the information was provided to it. So we're looking at it instead of having coordinator, the agents, where you as an individual have all your private accounts, but you can have your private agent be able to actually accurately get information that you need in order to give you the accurate answers while protecting all of that. So you can even share information, but without disclosing so much. Let's say if Evin or Billy wants something and I have it, but it is gated, then their agent can get that information securely because it is either my research or something that I provided. So this is where I see our privacy going beyond just us, but also communicating, coordinating with the outside world and individuals.
And I think the key words that Francis said really is what I have provided, right? Which is, and I think the other word that makes sense in this context is agent, right? Because agent, it has too many meanings, and in, I think Web3 agent doesn't mean anything at all because it's abused, but I would say that like agent in the sense of representing me, right? Like this speaks a little bit to what Billy was saying earlier about this idea of what is a person, right? And if a person expresses their intent to an agent, the agent's representing the person, then it's kind of, that agent kind of is the person for that use case, right? Like the agent is booking the travel for the person, you know, it's like it may as well be the person, right? So you shouldn't think of all Sibyls as evil or malevolent, right? So totally agree with this kind of take. I guess another word that popped out in your narrative though was privacy, right? Which I think it's a word that also has gotten so utterly abused by Web3 that it doesn't mean anything either. And it generally means something bad, right? It generally, to me, like the word privacy in Web3 kind of means some sort of unsustainable, like hyper-libertarian construct, you know, almost like the phrase free speech, right? Which to me is kind of, it doesn't work. So like, I guess to me, the thing that I think is the highest order bit and one of the most genius things that blockchain did is it created the seed of secrecy, right? Which is that we now have a nucleus, which is the private key, right? Which is essentially secret data and protected data, and we've created a game in which everyone has to have this nucleus, right? So I guess to me, the highest order bit isn't privacy; it's actually secrecy, and secrecy is interesting. Privacy is not interesting. So hot takes.
So, I mean, I think I agree with you. The privacy gets totally overused. I think what's interesting about this concept of secret information known only to you, is that we now have one bound for the disclosure of data, and then the other is putting it on chain in clear text, the most expressive and public form of data distribution that humanity has ever known. I think of privacy as just the absence of disclosure. And so, it is the end state that arrives after a user gives consent or consent is violated.
But I want to retort, right? Because to me, the paradigm of secrecy accrues to groups and organizations. So when you think about that, then it becomes more like the access control paradigm rather than this kind of weird political paradigm of absolute privacy, whatever that means. So, Billy?
Couple thoughts. So you mentioned one thing, like the private key kind of being the nucleus around which everything happens, especially kind of the aggregation of data. And I think especially in identity world, I think people have been thinking about decentralized identifiers for people most of the time. But I think we got to give everything in the world a decentralized identifier. Like even like every single concept, like words, and every single product, like every single thing in the world should have a decentralized identifier, and even like higher order complexity structures of compositions of these different concepts should also have a decentralized identifier.
Okay.
And then
I want to challenge Billy now to a duel.
Let's do it.
The problem with this construct of taking entities and assigning decentralized identifiers is basically the problem of sign signifier slippage. So I mentioned that post-structuralism and postmodern thought, right? So the concept of having a symbolic unique identifier, it only can accrue to a symbol because the thing itself is actually like ineffable or intangible.
How's it going to sign?
Yeah. So sign signifier slippage is a fundamental problem with the unique identification of everything.
Well, I think it's very useful to have an identifier. It doesn't need to sign. It doesn't need to be like a concept. You could think of some crazy stuff where it's like, okay, maybe like the shareholders of the word trustworthy can all come together to sign on behalf of the. I don't know. That's a crazy world. But there's a lot of things that you can just kind of like, you could like even counterfactually instantiate, like using Create2, a smart contract wallet for a thing that never gets claimed by anyone. It's just owned by no one. And so then the thing has a DID, that's an ETH address, but nothing can sign with it. It just exists. So then you can use it as the fulcrum point around which you aggregate the data. But yes.
Yeah, I think that really that gets into this beyond of the accrual of identityhood. Right, and it gets into the realm of things like paganism. So I think that's a separate panel. Francis?
I don't know what to do after that kind of interaction. I think it's better to just say, secrecy as far as your information should just stay with you, and you should choose what to disclose. We used to have this secrecy as far as organization, like peer reviewers and things of that nature, and now we can kind of disseminate it, but still sort of have an access point where information can be shared, but also protected. So that's my only 2 cents on that part.
All right, well, we're down to the short straws panel-wise, so we have very little time. I think we have time for maybe one last kind of hot take. And it really kind of, for me, it has to do with sort of authentication, because that's the base, right? Which is, if you don't have authentication, you can't assign an identifier, and you can't know what to do. Everything's built on top of that. So I guess any last hot takes on authentication?
Should not be predicated on a single unchangeable trait. Definitely +1 to Billy's note on the web of trust, superseding lists and those immovable factors.
And multi-factor authentication, yeah. Any other hot takes?
Hot take is, I think, kind of, if you look at the scheme of like a public-private key pair, like having something that's public and something that's private is really useful. So I think in this world of like private self-sovereign data, you kind of want to reveal like a little bit of data so that people can find it and request it. Because if everything's secret, you don't even know what to request. So you got to like reveal a little bit of stuff so people can know what to request from you or where to find things.
Final seconds. Francis, any last comment?
Care about privacy.
I like it. I think it's good. The privacy word pops up. All right. Well, I'm just going to close with this idea that multi-factor authentication is here. You don't really have to get rid of. Oh, they cut me off. Good job,
Ladies and gentlemen,
ETHDenver.
thank you very much
Thank
to
you very
Bye Bye
much.
Biometrics. Thank you, Miko, Billy, Francis, and